College London. Now she's an associate professor at University College London in Heritage Studies. And one of her most notable distinctions is that she helped set up the Department of Archaeology in Somaliland. And I believe that is where she's going to be talking to us about today. So, Sada, please take it away.
Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. I am from Somalia and Somaliland, and I'm also from Sweden, hence my blonde hair and blue eyes. When I was in Somalia, because of the war, we became refugees and ended up in Sweden. I was around 14, 15 at the time. I grew up in Mogadishu, in Somalia, and when I ended up in Sweden, I was studying secondary school. And during that time, I realized that there was no African history in the history books. So at that time, in our history book, there was only one page on Africa. And that page was just a paragraph on the transatlantic slave trade, and then a kind of a map. Almost, it looked like it was drawn by a child, and then a few arrows going to the transatlantic to show the slave routes. And having just come from Somalia, I was wondering, but surely there's more to African history. And we know there's more to African history. If there ever was a room to show that, it's this one. So it's a great honor to be invited to speak here today after so many years of working in the field, working with some of you, reading your extraordinary papers. It's nice to see face-to-face, the faces rather, from those papers. It's my first African archaeology conference, actually. Hence, it's a great pleasure. I would like to also take the opportunity to remember Professor Mire When I started studying Somali archaeology, this was back in 2005, he came to London and I had the opportunity to meet him. And it was an extraordinary meeting. He was a very, very kind, generous man. And from that moment on, he was just this guiding light. I really appreciated his approach to education when it comes to African archaeology. And I know there's a session on that, and I look forward to that. I'd also like to thank Stephen Brandt. I'm sure if he's here now. Stephen was one of the first people to systematically study Somali archaeology. But unfortunately, the war cut it short. And he moved on to Ethiopia. And as a whole, in the Horn of Africa, we're still benefiting from what he's achieved and his ongoing legacy. I'd also like to acknowledge and mention Mohammed Osman, who will be speaking, I think, on Stephen Brandt's session. And that is a person who I discovered when I saw a paper on the destruction of Somali archaeology when I was studying in 2005. And the first paper, the only paper at the time, on what has happened to Somali archaeology and heritage during the war was by Stephen Brandt and Mohammed Osman. And Merrick, Mohammed, and Stephen have all made their efforts to preserve and protect Somali heritage before the war, and have inspired me in my journey. So the war has been a significant influence for me in developing my approach to African archaeology. Around 2005, I wanted to know why there was no news, a part of this paper that I mentioned, on the destruction of Somali heritage. Why were Somalis not angry, disappointed, sad? And I interviewed people, and it seemed so indifferent about the objects and the museums that have been looted and the sites that have been destroyed. And eventually, I started getting frustrated, and I said, but what's your heritage if you don't care about all this? And they said, my heritage. I come from that region. My grandparents taught me how to use this object or that object, and they immediately picked up the objects I was talking about. And I realized there was something that our best practices in archaeology were not aware of when it comes to heritage and archaeology, that there are societies who do not value the object per se or the monument per se, but the knowledge. So the knowledge that they were sharing with me was encyclopedic. At the time I was studying archaeology, and they were talking about the exact things that we observe and want to know about a site or an object, the chain of production. This is how it's made. This is when it's made. We use it for this. So it was a cognitive dissonance that on one hand, they had this amazing knowledge about their cultural heritage, but the archaeology is just non-existent in their mind. And I wanted to know why. Was it because of the war or because of the nomadic culture? I realized in many African countries, and I think mainly in the global south, we have similar problems. Archaeology came as a colonial transplant. The first museums were colonial transplants. Many traditional societies still do not have the concept of a museum. It's been through the process of colonization that museums have been set up. In Somalia, the Italians set up a museum, which was led to deteriorate after they left. And the material that was in that museum, most of the archaeology was taken away when the Italians left in 1960. And when I interviewed one of the people who were actually one of the directors, he said, Sada, it was in the 70s, Somalia wanted development, and then there was this museum with the artifacts from the countryside. Who wants that? So there was also the introduction of a museum came in the sense of essentializing the culture rather than something that the people were part of creating. And so this led to less interest in museums and what museums are. But people still kept their knowledge. The other thing was that during colonial times, archaeology objects disappeared, excavations were sporadic. And after the African states' liberations, you have new energy, new nationalism. But then the connection between an archaeology that's still very much colonial in its mindset, and then this new nationalism, there was a clash. In some areas, it led to beautiful fusion eventually, but in most parts of Africa, it's still struggling. And coupled with the African states' beginning of new internal conflicts and the Cold War politics, where colonial was never really gone, and what became very volatile states in many parts of Africa. Somalia fitted that picture well. And so the war broke out eventually, and Somalia never set up national heritage law. There was a dictatorship. UNESCO came into the picture, but it was a top-down approach. And it was not really asking Somalis, what do you think about, what is your heritage? It was, we are helping you with the museums that the Italians built. That's already deteriorating, that nobody cares about. But then I thought, okay, this is what we have in common with most of Africa. But what I knew there was something particular about the Somali situation. Marek Posnanski, Stephen Brand. This is actually a platform we set up for the archaeology of the Horn of Africa, Horn Heritage. So we are so thrilled to have one of Stephen's work, which is the film on pottery, and we are collecting as much information as possible from the archaeology of the Horn of Africa, so I extend you the invitation. So the difference between then the particular thing in Somalia was that, and in Somaliland eventually, is that Somalis, because they have this, what I call knowledge-centered approach, which preserves knowledge and skill rather than monuments and objects, many monuments have suffered in the process. So how can we understand the knowledge-centered approach? People are nomadic. Most Somalis are nomadic. They take very little with them when they move. And whatever they are making or they need, they create on the spot. Everything is organic. Women build the houses, which are such an ingenious invention. They are cool in the hot day, and they're warm at night because of the ventilation of the natural organic material they're made of. So I understood that the approaches that I would need to really steer the archaeology I wanted to create needed to follow the perspectives that's naturally coming out of these questions. Why? So this was one way for me to understand the culture, but there was also another distinct reason why Somalis did not care about archaeology, and that is our myth of origin. Our myth of origin talks about our Islamic heritage. Our Islamic heritage is something that we believe that Somalis did not exist before Islam. So that then means that the archaeology, anything that is pre-Islamic or conceived as strange in any way, does not belong to Somali people. Hence, it can be looted, it can be destroyed. But this also led to why do we think we were from, we only existed in Islamic times. And that myth of origin and its value and the ideology behind it led me to investigate the pre-Islamic history of Somali people. So I went back to Somaliland after 16 years in exile in 2007. And at the time, I had no idea. I knew there was at least one foreign team working in Somaliland archaeology, but I had no idea whether there were people interested in archaeology and how I would be perceived. That was 2006 when I started my research into pre-Islamic heritage. At the same time that I'm starting my PhD, unbeknownst to me, I knew there was the Islamic Courts Union, which had power in Somalia. And the Islamic Courts Union were implementing strict Sharia law. And in 2006, the youth organization of the Islamic Courts Union felt that the Islamic Courts Union sold out to the ideology, the extremist ideology. So they broke away and they became what we know as Al-Shabaab. I'm sure you've heard of Al-Shabaab, right? So Al-Shabaab in 2006 broke away from Islamic Courts Union. I came to Somaliland. My project was not funded because nobody understood really what I was doing. Was it archaeology? Was it anthropology? Was it, are you working in, what is Somaliland? Somalia is at war. They need food and shelter. What are you talking about, archaeology? So I eventually went there, and my family helped me. The first month I was there, I have close family in 3 provinces, so uncles and aunties, and I was able to map archaeological sites. And I was in touch with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The idea was that I would speak to the minister the first day I come, and they would give me papers, but I got an email saying, when you arrive, unfortunately, the minister is away, so you can go and visit your family, and you're allowed to survey if you want so, but come back after that and we will chat. So I went and disappeared. I think if I press, we'll see some pictures. So it was a very organic, what I call, in Somali, we have a culture which is self-help. Iska wuxu qabso. So when I didn't have funding, my mother's generation were the nation builders. And I've always heard the stories how they would just come together and build a hospital, come together and build whatever. So it was a way for me to go, okay, if no one is going to fund, Somalia was not built with much money to begin with anyway. So if I'm doing just archaeology, I can also use resources, be resourceful. So my family then came with me. We just grabbed the camera and my GPS, and we went all over the country and started with my relatives on my mother's side and father's side, documenting sites along the way. And what transpired was that the archaeological sites were totally neglected. And this was a situation where people were living on the archaeological sites. When I came, because there are parallel things happening, there's my PhD happening, and there's Salafi ideology completely taken over all of the Somali territory. So when I visit my family and they're welcoming me for the first time in 16 years, they can't do the traditional dances during the day because they will be attacked or somebody will talk about that they've been dancing. So dancing is not allowed. Traditional dresses are not allowed. Poetry is not allowed. So to receive me, they had to do it in the middle of the night. I didn't need dances. They slaughtered animals. I'm vegetarian. But it was good. It was held in the night because I could sit in a dark corner and eat my rice. It just showed me that what I was looking for was under threat at the same time. So after the dances, obviously, my aunties are there, and they just know me as Sada. They don't know an archaeologist or whoever I have become in the past 16 years in Sweden or London or anywhere. And they are interested in continuing just life with me as their daughter. And these ceremonies are things that we do to keep our heritage going. And now all of that, so the knowledge-centered approach is itself what I'm trying to capture is under threat. So at the same time, the sites that I was most interested for pre-Islamic heritage are actually ironically, the Sufi saint shrines, which are Islamic, because they were built on pre-Islamic sacred landscapes. So yesterday we saw in Sada's presentation, Keynote, where she showed a picture of ribbons on trees. These are Somali versions of that. You would see the Somali natural material made of a hig tree, which people have tied on the, you can see that hanging from the tree, is to pray for fertility. But now the whole area is derelict. You can see the saint shrines are not being cared for, especially in areas where there might be dormant Al-Shabaab cells. So when I was actually filming this and recording this, a man came to us and said, "What are you doing here? You should stop doing that. Why are you recording this? Who are you?" And eventually we all sat down and I asked him if I could capture our conversation. So I made a short film of that conversation. And it was interesting to observe how his Salafi ideology is, in Somalia, it's completely new to us. We've had Sufi tradition, which is very inclusive. So it was really interesting to see that formation, and I had a glimpse of hope because he wasn't really set on it. So we talked about it and he said, "So you're Muslim and you believe in coming from Arabia." And I said, "So these are important sheikhs who brought Islam?" And I said, "Yes." "Yeah, they brought Islam. Yeah, but we are but now we're moving on." And and again, my family, Sada is here, milk the cow, milk the sheep. It's still living culture. It's continuing. You're not special. You do what you need to do in the family. So it's a continuing tradition. So a lot of things are happening syncretically. So the Sufis are now getting then this stigma. To be a Sufi is becoming a bad thing. It was already becoming that during the socialist, so-called scientific socialism that we had in Somalia. But with the Salafi, that became a concrete threat to the main concrete heritage monuments that Somalis for centuries cared for, which are the Sufi saint shrines. So in 2008, they start destroying Sufi saint shrines from the get-go. But in 2008, it makes the news. There is a link that I've decided to not show because it's so horrific. But I think you get the image if you know about what Ansar ad-Din did in Mali and the El Mahdi case, where it became the first cultural case the ICC prosecuted. And he actually was a teacher, and he pleaded guilty. And Mali actually self-referred to the ICC because they ratified their part of their state member. This is an Islamist, the main ideologue of the Islamic movements in Somalia. And he had several Al-Qaeda associated, linked Islamist organizations. And I will come back to this figure because he's kind of stalked me for the past 20 years, threats and what have you. But he was wanted by the US for atrocities all over the Horn of Africa and East Africa. He was behind the killing of hundreds of medical students graduating in Mogadishu. He was behind annihilating a whole generation. So when I was doing this survey, which I showed you the pictures of, right around just a couple of weeks before I was going to Somaliland for the first time in 16 years, UCL News, my university, as a student, approached me and said, "Oh, we'd like to do a news piece on you." you're going to, what is it called, Somaliland. They thought that was interesting. And I had just come from WAC Inter Congress in Jamaica, I think it was in 2007. And they asked me for a picture, and I had just come from WAC, so I gave them a picture from that conference. Well, not the actual conference, but I was on the Blue Mountains of Jamaica, and I had dreadlocks, and I used to do triathlon at the time, so I was wearing this really tight biking cyclist shirt, and I went to Somaliland thinking that in Sweden we say närmast sörjande, which is the closest to mourners, that this news piece would only be, a few friends who were doing PhD. I would just email the link to them, and that's it. I was in the field for a month, as I said, doing everything. And then after 5 weeks, I come to the finally ministry. I'm really shaking. I don't know what I'm going to face. The ministers there, new minister, and I'm wearing the traditional hijab and everything, and I just shake. And I'm like, oh, no, we're not actually supposed to shake hands. I'm relearning my culture. And then he said, oh, we've been waiting for you. And he shows me this picture, this magazine. Apparently, the 5 weeks I was in the field, that article, what did they say now, went viral? So all over the diaspora, there was this, oh, have you seen the picture of this Somali archaeologist? Oh, she's my favorite archaeologist. She's got dreadlocks. She's probably high all the time. It was Facebook, and then my cousins found out about it, and they were like, no, don't write that about her. She doesn't drink, she doesn't smoke, she doesn't even eat meat. She can't even have coffee or tea. Don't talk about her. She's not. And I'm like, what is going on? So the minister, I'm coming there, he just says, we've been waiting for you. Here. It was horror. And I said, oh, yeah, it's me. And I had to process the fact that actually UCL did publish this. And how did it end up here? So what then happened was, because it went viral, it went to Al-Shabaab as well. So now they had a lot of things on me. Here I am saying I'm going to preserve archaeology. And oh, this is what she looks like. And there was also another racist element to this. So if you are a Somali and a woman, and if you ever dare to show your hair, at least you should dance to the tune of the patriarchy, and you should straighten your hair, or you should lighten your skin. So somebody saying, I am representing Somali culture, and doing it on their own terms, and that person being a woman was a bit too far for them. So although they could clearly see I was Somali, in Somaliland, when I was walking in the markets, they would say to me, Oromo. And yet I was dressed like this. I thought I was covered, but not to their standard. And Oromo in the Somali culture is to other somebody. You're Ethiopian. So you have to conform. So it was a lot of battles that you're fighting. But the minister, apart from making the joke about my hair, he was very receptive, and he said, we will take you to the president. And the one good thing that article did was that those who were interested in archaeology actually got to find out about the fact that there was somebody from their country who was doing this. And they all tried to approach me. And by that time, the president had also heard about me. Hargeisa is very small. So when I went there with my laptop, with the sites that I've been working on, and I said, you need a department for archaeology, but I am a PhD student, so I have to go back and do my PhD, and I am not funded, so I have to finish it as quickly as possible. He said, no, you're going to do it. And he said, I'm giving you 3 days because the budget is due, and I want you to send me all the financial works, what you need for a department. Mind you, this is a country that does not exist. They have almost no budget. And I went back, and the minister said to me, Sada, what did you just do? We have there are so few departments, and you're now setting up a department of archaeology, and you're actually getting some money. So we managed to get very little money, but enough to hire people. I got to meet one of the people who've been helping to survey sites. His name is Muhammad Ali Abdi. And his survey material and my survey material, we joined that, as well as other departmental, regional coordinators who were looking for sites. And often it was mainly for providing those sites to foreign teams visiting. But now we were going to build a department. And we were going to, we started with, I wanted something that starts with the community itself. And so we hired people from the community to look after the sites. So instead of hiring people in the capital city, we hired the locals where they were to look after the sites. Eventually, we set out a whole program and training people. And this we've done, and also my foundation, when I left the government, I kind of work on the same things. And I did leave eventually the government because, we wanted to, I think there's a picture of, is it moving too fast? Okay, those are the maps we've been putting together. This is one of the people who helped map archaeological sites in Somaliland. I have written an article compiling this back in 2015, and he's also mentioned there. He mapped most of Sanag region, and he passed away in 2011, unfortunately. So what I realized after mapping and surveying sites with the team is that within the people that were already in the department, there was already a tradition where, because foreign teams came and go sporadically, they were used to a certain kind of archaeology being done a certain way. So to set up legal systems, to look at contracts, they didn't have the knowledge, so they didn't have the confidence to engage people. But also, there's poverty. So what happened was, when we would survey things, the material will disappear because some would take it to then excavate sites themselves and sell artifacts. So we stopped doing even collecting survey material. And I set out the policy that we won't have any excavations until we have law. So I've been working in Somaliland for the past 18 years, and I have never excavated a single site. And I won't do that until we have heritage law. I think, for me, it's the ethical way to do. There's so much to build. There's so much archaeology to study already, using innovative ways of studying archaeology. What happened recently was I was made aware of archaeological material that has been excavated that has actually been sold by people who are within the department. There was an expat who he did a PhD, I think, in politics, Somali studies, and I didn't know who he was, but he called me, got hold of me and said, are you Sada Mire? And I said, yes, I've been to the archaeology department. I wanted to see objects that a few years ago I saved them from looters. So basically, he's a white man. He was approached by locals. They said, would you like to buy artifacts? And he said, no, I don't want to. And they said, okay, we'll go and sell it to somebody else. And he thought, oh, okay. then I will buy it. And straight away he drove to the ministry and said, here you go. These artifacts were offered to me, but I bought them, and I want you, to have it and take care of it. But the horrible thing is, this person came to the ministry, this time to just see the artifacts that he a while ago saved, only to be offered to buy them again. So it just confirmed to me that I made the right ethical choice. So studying then the archaeology without excavating and finding methodologies to do that. I said before that there is this myth of origin, and it anchors us to the Islamic shrines. They are all over the country, they are dotted everywhere. So the nomads gather there, and people in the cities go there for the pilgrimage times. And we all come from, or our lineages go back to each one of them. My clan is Ishaq, and the top shrine is Sheikh Ishaq. And then you see my sub-clan, Sheikh, is also buried there. And then my sub-clan Sheikh is buried in another region. So in the lineages, I can count to the 11th century. So my ancestors all the way to 11th century. And that is interesting, 11th century, because this is where Islam comes into the country. So what happens is, instead of saying that we converted to Islam, they made a clear cut to say, actually, we did not exist before Islam. But we still have the shrines on the sacred pre-Islamic landscapes. And that's what I've been studying. The site I've been working on is in Khadle. It turned out to be an ancient ruined town as well. Probably the first, well, Sayla is a contender, but Sayla was ahead, but the first capital city of Oudal Kingdom. I make the distinction of Oudal rather than Adal, because Adal is a distorted name. The word is Oudal, and it means the land of saints in Somali. Dal, O is saint, Dal is Proto-Eastern Cushitic word meaning to give birth. The Oromo have it, the Konsa have it, it means Dal. It's like the word rock. The word rock is Dagah in Somali, Dage in Oromo. So it's important to understand that what we see on the old Arab maps are names that have been written differently. Now, when I say to Somalis, it's Oudal Kingdom, some will say, no, it's Adal, because Oudal now, today, is just one part of Somaliland, and that clan that is there are not the major clan. So to give them the credit to say this whole kingdom is Oudal, people don't want to do that. But we, as a scholarship, have to use the correct term, regardless of who we please and don't. So it's really important to do that. So Obar Khadle is, in the context of this conference, extremely important because it is a cultural crossroad. It's on an ancient trade route, the famous rock art site Lasgel. You have Obar Khadle, and you have the sacred landscape of Nasahablood. But also, the site, it's like Lyon, Belgrade, Leiden. It's kind of the confluence of two rivers. And then you have the ancient city wall. I don't know if the pointer works, but here you have the ancient city wall. So studying this site, the bog standard Sufi saint shrine stuff, but also the landscape, you can see that the archaeologists, this is a drone video. I won't show it now because I have a short time, but it basically shows you the context of the site. And when you look at it, this is the ruined camp. At some point it was this big because we can see the enclosure. But also you have phallic stones. And then you have enclosures that belong to the pre-Islamic leader, as they call him, who had a duel with the Muslim sheikh who converted the people when he won the duel. And that area belongs to the pre-Islamic leader. And the pre-Islamic leader comes from people, obviously they are other in anything that is non-Islamic. One clan who has been ostracized to be the scapegoat. These are the Gaboye. The Gaboye are marginalized, and it's systematic. This is what I talk about. The apartheid is that it's in the Somali system. It's the power-sharing system. If I vote, my vote counts as one vote. If they vote, it counts as half vote. So the ideology of coming from Arabia is linked directly to power in Somaliland. Hence why people like this Al-Shabaab, who want the purest ideology, want to keep this idea of us coming from Arabia, because then they lose power to the other people. So this is why it's important to look at the site and the fact that the archaeology offers this diverse heritage, which represents also cairns, as you saw, but also the dolmens, and what is supposed to be Jewish heritage. The reason why they can ostracize, treat them as outcasts, is that they say these people were actually Jewish. There's no evidence that they were Jewish. There is some Jewish heritage because we are very near Ethiopia as well with the Beta Israel. There's, so you have, but also you have Christianity as this site. The first in situ evidence of Christianity in Somali territory. So what we are looking at is that archaeology, which is very diverse, but extremely threatening to the not only extremist philosophy, but also to the heart of power sharing in especially Somalia, because Somaliland has the voting system, but Somalia has the 4.5 system, which almost institutionalizes the racism against. And I wanted to study our pre-Islamic heritage, and this is where I was able to actually talk about that we share more with our neighbors in the Horn of Africa than Arabia. So to show people, you don't look Arab, I don't look Arab, I speak Somali, I understand half of the Oromo, half of what Komso are saying. We are surely from here. So archaeologically, we can obviously argue. So when I published Divine Fertility, the book, I want to come back to the guy I showed first, who was the ideologue. He's wanted, he's done all this, but he was finally captured. When he was finally captured, in 2020, first my PhD was put under restricted access at UCL already. And now, when I published the book, he announced on a YouTube that we should burn her house, burn her book. But this is not the only problem we are facing. We are also facing destruction of the sites, continuing looting, and neglect of Sufi saint shrines. But I also think, to conclude, because I'm probably on overtime, that this is one of the most critical sites in Somaliland for exactly the reason we are here, which is connections, diversity. And if we can save sites like Ober Khadle and talk truth to power, I think we can create cohesion in the Horn of Africa as a whole. Thank you so much for your time.
We have 2 minutes for questions. So. feel free.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. You talk about the knowledge-centered approach. My question is, at the moment, is there a mechanism in place that that you have that transfers this approach to the younger generation? Hence, you say it's knowledge-based. Is there a way, is there a method of transferring this knowledge to the younger generation? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, it's organic, it's happening, and I was lucky to observe it by asking why. I don't think I got to ask my mom as a child growing up in Africa enough why. We didn't have that parent relationship, I think. But eventually, I became that child again, and now I ask her why. So, because people observe how children learn it instinctively very early to observe and to learn. So it's something that's organically happening, but archaeologically we were not looking for it. From cultural heritage perspectives, we were coming more from top-down approach. Archaeologically, we can implement it, we can study the landscapes, we can interview people, we can walk around, we can observe, and actually the most important thing is what is not being said. Often people tell you they're doing something, but they're doing something else. So I think that's actually the distinction for us to see and observe what people are doing rather than what they say they're doing.
Thank you so much for your presentation. You suggested that no laws, no excavations, yet you have some sites that have been salvaged, that have been destroyed. What do you think should be done about it? Because I believe sites that are prone to destruction, you should have maybe some excavations to preserve the heritage and the culture of that region. What would you suggest should be done in such scenarios, since you're saying no laws, no excavations?
That's a very good question. That's the first thing I thought about when I was back in 2007 when I was there. I was like, oh, we have to salvage this. This is under threat. They are building here. They're doing a road here. So things are developing. But the good thing about Somaliland is that it's because it's not funded by foreign powers. It's organically through remittance often. So because it's not recognized, I should say that, it's not internationally recognized. So the kind of development that could potentially endanger sites is mainly happening in the capital, in Hargeisa, or in Boro. There are some ruined towns which are close by to some cities, but what I observed when I came there was that they were already expansive. I wrote an article back in 2011, which I called the emergence of Somali culture, meaning that there was just too much being dug up already. When I arrived in Somaliland, the first time we went to Sanag, I went into a shop, and the shopkeeper, the first question he asked me was, do you want cat, which is the Mire, if you in East Africa, this is the kata atulis. Who can explain? Paul, maybe you can. Mire. So they chew the Mire, right? So he asked me, do you want Mire or do you want antiquities? So for me to go and say, I am excavating, me who is known as an archaeologist, I'm going to excavate a site, would have just helped that. There is no site worth excavating in Somaliland before we have heritage laws, because it's just justifying everyone else. So far, no site has been excavated to save the site.
Last question.
Thank you very much. I'm a bit scared of what you told us, to be honest. So apologies if I'm asking something that you maybe already said, because I arrived a bit late. So this paradigm that you are setting up of doing archaeology without actually focusing on the artifact and on the site is possible these days to follow up, because we have the tools to virtually do archaeology. So I wonder, just through experience, I would assume that you do not have any kind of, or not a lot of digital infrastructure for building up databases and things like that. So I wonder, are you in contact, or do you have support from maybe Sweden, where you did your studies, to pursue and secure digital recording of the sites that you are doing? Or for instance, like larger projects like Paul's Mayasam, or what we do. I would be curious about that, because we can do now what you are pursuing. So we can do archaeology and preservation by digital recording.
Thank you for your question. And so don't get me wrong, I'm an archaeologist. I want to dig at some point. And that's why I prioritized having all these supports, so that both me and any other person, foreign teams, local teams, can dig with, with the law in place. So we have now drafted the Somaliland Heritage Law, which is with the ministry, and it's being forwarded to the parliament. So we are hoping this will be passed quickly. And I think we can do excavations, but I want them done ethically. And before I can do that, I would like to explore exactly what you said. And this is why we set up hornheritage.org. It's a platform where we are communicating our research, as well as highlighting any sites that need protection, anything that's under threat. And I am very interested in also hearing the work you're doing, the work Paul's doing, and I hope that Horn Heritage would be a contribution to that across Africa.
Thank you very much. So now we have coffee break. You can have more questions during the coffee. And we can get back at 10:15, but maybe 5 minutes before.